Hello, welcome back to the channel. So glad to have you join me today as we continue on in our study of end time prophecy, the book of Revelation. Join me, if you will, at chapter 12, verse 1. And we read, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered." Now in chapters 12 through 14, we have explanatory prophecies that describe some of the major personages and movements of the latter half of the tribulation period. So this woman, she represents Israel, and her child is Christ, the Messiah. Now, the woman is not the church, since the church did not bring forth Christ, but it was Christ that brought forth the church. Her identification as the persecuted Jewish saints clearly proves that the church is not on earth during the tribulation period. We've already talked about that in the study before. The sun depicts her as God's chosen nation. The moon under her feet alludes to God's promise of dominion. The crown of 12 stars pictures royalty and relates to the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, the birth pains refer to the period before the birth of Christ, when Israel was waiting for redemption by the Messiah. All right, let's go on at verse 3. "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." Now, the dragon is identified as Satan in verse 9. His red color shows his murderous character. His 7 heads and 7 crowns depict the completeness and universality of his power and influence. His 10 horns shows Satan's connection with the 4th beast of Daniel chapter 7, and with the beast from the sea that we will get to in chapter 13 next week. Now, the third part of the stars of heaven are the fallen angels who followed Satan in his original rebellion against God. At the time of the birth of Christ, Satan was ready to kill him. And we read in verse 5, "And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." Now, the man-child is Jesus Christ, destined to rule all nations as the Messiah. He was caught up unto God and to his throne at his ascension into heaven. Now, the wilderness represents anywhere outside Palestine. Now, during the last half of the tribulation period, 1,260 days, which equals 3.5 years, Israel will take refuge among the Gentile nations, where God will care for her. Now, chronologically, verse 6 occurs after verses 7 through 12 and is equivalent to verse 14. All right, let's go on verse 7. We read, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the vision of war in heaven anticipates Satan's exclusion from heaven and his restriction to the earth during the last half of the tribulation. Michael, the archangel, is the leader of God's holy angels, and Satan is the chief of the fallen angels. At the middle of the tribulation, God will empower Michael, the archangel, and his forces to cast Satan and his forces out of access to heaven. Now we clearly see that Satan has access to heaven and the throne of God in Job, the first 2 chapters. So Satan must confine his activities to the earthly sphere, is what we're seeing here in these passages of Scripture. Now he's given 4 designations. 1, dragon, which pictures his monstrous character as the enemy of God. And then 2, serpent, connects him with the clever deception of Eve spoken of in Genesis chapter 3. And then 3, devil means slander, and 4, Satan means adversary. He also deceiveth the whole world. Going on at verse 10, we read, And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the and by the word of their testimony. And they love not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwelleth in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and to the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. The words salvation, strength, kingdom, and power all refer to the coming of the millennial kingdom of Christ. Now, with reference to believers, Satan is most commonly a tempter and the accuser of the brethren before God. Believers can and will overcome him through the blood of Christ and their witness or their testimony about Christ. Now, the last half of the tribulation will be a time of terrible, terrible trouble on earth. It will be Satan's final attempt to prevent the return and the reign of Jesus Christ. He has only a short time to try to prevent the establishment of Christ's kingdom. Therefore, he has great wrath and intensifies his persecution of Israel, God's chosen nation, while setting up his own counterfeit kingdom through the beast, which we know as the false Messiah. Now going on verse 13, And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. So Satan's persecution of Israel is apparently an attempt to exterminate God's chosen people, thereby preventing the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham and David in the Messianic kingdom. But God, in verse 6, protects Israel. The wings of a great eagle represent swift escape from persecution. The wilderness symbolizes the Gentile nations of the world, where believers will help to hide Jews from the Antichrist persecution. Now, according to Zechariah chapter 13, beginning at verse 7 through 9, we read, Wake, O sword, against my shepherd and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. So, 2/3 of the Israelites will die first. The time and times and half a time equals 3.5 years, which refers to the last 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation period. Now, the time of the Great Tribulation is what that's often referred to. Going on, verse 15. And the serpent cast out, back in chapter 12, verse 15. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So the flood here symbolizes overwhelming evil and persecution. Now Satan, through the Antichrist and his forces, will persecute the Jews throughout the earth. But the Gentile believers of the earth will receive them and hide them. The remnant, it can refer to either the Jewish believers who have refused to worship Satan and his beast, or it could refer to Gentile believers who are the seed of Abraham through Jesus Christ. Now, the last half of the tribulation period will see a worldwide persecution of those who genuinely believe in Jesus Christ. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 12. And next week, we'll continue on in chapter 13. I thank you so much for taking your time to join me here on the channel and for this Bible study. And I look forward to seeing you in the next Bible study next week. Take care. Blessings to you. I pray that you have a great weekend. Hope to see you next week. Take care.